Hello and welcome to the DOL Pod. I'm your host, Alejandro Otero. This week, we'll feature a conversation on assessing and predicting job outcomes in AI. Our guest today is Dr. Talitha Washington, Executive Director of Howard's Center for Applied Data Science and Analytics. Dr. Washington, thank you so much for joining us. Share a little bit of your background with our listeners.
Sure, it's great to be here. Like I said, my name is Dr. Washington. I serve as Executive Director for what we like to call CATSA. That's the Center for Applied Data Science and Analytics. I also have the Sean McLeese Endowed Chair, and I'm a professor of mathematics. So I'm a mathematician. And I also co-chair at Howard University our President's AI Advisory Council, where we're thinking about AI in education and research and operations and partnerships, and how do we enhance and steward that in a responsible way. So a part of that was thinking about what do students need to know with respect to entering an AI-driven workforce? And then what does it really even mean to have an AI job? So from there came the idea to develop this research coordination network at a national scale to really delve into, well, what is an AI job or AI adjacent job? What are the knowledge, skills, and abilities needed to excel? And then how do we build education and curricula around these AI jobs? And so really excited about having all of this work here at Howard and also with our partners across the country, the world, I should say, and delving into creating opportunities for our students in AI, as well as advancing research, scholarship, and innovations.
This Howard University-led research coordination network, it's focused on the predicting job outcomes for the AI landscape. Would you be able to share a little bit about the tangible risk that America is facing right now if we fail to coordinate our workforce preparation for AI? Why is the timing initiative assessing and predicting these job outcomes in AI so critical right now?
You're exactly right. Timing is key and essential. The AI as a concept has been around since the 50s. So it's been around for a while. But what has come to us in our phones, our earphones, our cars, our technologies that live in our houses, live at work, is this thing called artificial intelligence. And one of the questions is, how do we harness AI to augment human performance and also do it in a way that's responsible, that preserves privacy, security, and doesn't cause harm? The uptake of this AI technology across the country, across the world, has went off super fast. I guess some would call this an inflection point of sorts. And so while we have the AI technology, we're also trying to figure out at the same quick, fast pace, how do we leverage it to make work better? Meaning, how can I use AI to do some of my back office work so that I can perform more? We have these things called AI agents that perhaps can do some of that back office work, so that way my time can be freed up to, be in the creative space. But what does it mean for this AI agent to do this back office work? What work should it do and should not do? And then who's going to check it to make sure it's doing it right? So I guess you can develop an AI compliance checker, but I digress. And so really thinking about this AI work, how do we even predict jobs in this market? The market is, we'll say, fluctuating in new ways, and it's being disrupted by this AI technology. And what should be jobs, what could be jobs, and how will jobs evolve? How will the workplace evolve? I was given a lecture over at Howard on AI, and I mentioned to this young group of students, undergraduate and graduate students, saying, at one time, we did not have computers where we work. We didn't have laptops. We didn't have desktop computers in a place of work. That just didn't happen. And I can even remember when I got my first email when I was an undergrad way back at Spelman College. So that was a long time ago. But emails weren't even common at one time. When emails came into play, when this thing called a desktop computer and then a laptop computer came, we had to then re-envision, how can that augment human performance? How can we leverage that technology to do this thing called work. Do it more efficiently, do it again in a responsible way, do it in a way that makes sense. Now we have more technology coming, that's AI, and we're figuring that out as well as we go along. As they say, sometimes we feel like we're building the plane as we're flying it and creating the runway at the same time. Yeah, that is potentially it, because the deployment of this AI technology has such a high accelerated rate that sometimes it feels like we're drinking from a fire hose. But for me, that's kind of where the fun and innovation comes. It comes at a place where we feel pressured and also a place where we have the opportunities to expand and grow.
Right. So, there's the aspect of you're sort of anticipating a moving target while being inundated with all this information and having to account for it. And I'm glad that you brought up that example. You're right. I think a lot of people just getting started in the workforce, they're digital natives and they grew up with all this technology in their classrooms, in their parents' workspaces, in the workspaces they interned in, maybe. And so to them, it's always been a part of the infrastructure. And now we're seeing AI get molded on to this highly digitized world, and it's going to shake things up. It's going to create a change in how we operate. Absolutely. I want to loop back around to the research network that you are working with, because you're bringing together a broad spectrum of voices. We're dealing with K through 12 educators. We're dealing with high industry level tech entrepreneurs, government officials. So practically speaking, what would you say is the process or methodology you and your team are employing to merge these different needs and make sure we're hearing everyone's voices? How do you put this all together in one cohesive strategy?
That's an excellent question. And I always go off with there's a saying, it says, never be so sure of something you wouldn't take something better. So while we will guess the starting point for the Research Coordination Network, it will grow and evolve over time. When we know more, we may do things differently. But initially, we'll be launching soon a website. We'll launch where people can apply and become a part of the network. We'll also launch where organizations can say, hey, I would like to partner with the network and host meetings, convenings to inform what this thing of AI jobs is about. So we will hold a number of convenings, workshops, listening sessions. So we're listening to different sectors. We'll also be connecting across academia, industry, government, community-based nonprofits to really piece together how we can leverage and expand AI at a national scale as it pertains to AI and jobs. And I always say, this big work, you can never do it alone. So I have a wonderful steering committee made up of folks from across the country. On the PI team, those are the principal investigators. Dr. Grady from North Carolina Central, Dr. Quintelli from New Mexico State University, also Dr. Brown from Houston Community College. But we also have different people on the steering committee helping us think about this, anywhere from economists to computer scientists, to math educators, to people who do this thing of educating and startups and all the rest of that. And so it really does take this multiple perspectives of the steering committee to make sure that we're looking broadly and also engaging with our industry partners and friends to connect with them so that we're leveraging each other, both in higher education and industry. Both higher education and industry are developing curricula to do training for either people who are working or people who will work with respect to AI. And so one of the things is, how can we bridge the curriculum between the two? I'll give you an example. This past June at Howard University, Amazon Web Services came to Howard and they opened up their internal AI curriculum to educators. And they provided to over 200 faculty. We hosted them at Howard University. It was hybrid, so others could delve into their curriculum to see, well, how is Amazon Web Services? How are they training? How are they thinking about machine learning and AI? What does an industry-aligned curriculum even look like or mean? And then how can I then take that back into my classroom as a faculty member or a teacher? And so we have faculty and instructors who are now embedding and utilizing that information in their classrooms. So we'd like to facilitate and support more of that work, more of those initiatives, and just really bridging that gap between AI innovations, between industry and education, whether it's higher education or K-12 education.
Speaking of the speed, it kind of feels like the job market is changing very frequently as well. So how would you say the network is managing to stay ahead of this curve and anticipate some of these material changes in the job market? Are there any mechanisms that you're using to make sure that the needs of right now are being addressed in your research and in the work that you do?
Well, there's both. There's the, I guess, the needs of yesterday, the needs of right now, and then also anticipating what are going to be the needs of the future. And how do we then identify where and what these AI jobs are? Where do they live and what are they specifically? What sort of knowledge, skills, and abilities are needed there? And then also, as AI evolves, it was generative AI, and then it became the hot topic was agentic AI, where you can have AI agents do your back office work, or you can even have them as quote unquote personnel. And now we have voice AI agents where I can take a snippet of my voice and you might be calling my voice AI agent who can vet my calls and have a conversation with you and then could send it to me if needed, or they could quote unquote handle the call. So voice AI agents are what's next. So while the technology is evolving, the way we can do work evolves, but then also there's the security, privacy, responsibility. That's also evolving. What should we do? What should we not do? And just because we should do something doesn't mean that we should. And so how do we take that into account? And so, like I said, fortunately on the Research Coordination Network, I have some amazing economists, both two of them, which are at Howard, Dr. Mari Swinton and Dr. Latanya Brown Robinson, who will really help steward the thinking about how do we identify the workforce trends? How do we identify where they are? How do we then follow them as this AI technology is moving? So that way, when we look at our AI curriculum, how do we enhance and expand that and maybe even retool it, expand it to meet the evolving workforce needs? Here at Howard University, we're in the throes of developing AI curriculum that we look to launch this coming spring. And so while we are taking our best educated, research-based, industry-informed guess as to what the syllabus should be, what the learning outcomes should be, we do it with the assumption that we will come back to these courses very frequently to update, to retool, to rethink. There have been other universities that have really mapped out a university-wide AI curriculum based only on, we'll say, generative AI, but now we have all these other types of AI. So now what, right? So we don't want to get too bogged down into one sort of AI technology, but we want to approach it with a spirit of agility and flexibility and being responsive, not overly responsive, thoughtfully responsive to understand how the AI technology is changing, and then also connecting that on how do we prepare students for that need.
How are you measuring the impact of your work? What goes into your metrics for success? Are there any concrete results you're looking for that are going to prove that the network's efforts are making a difference in students finding jobs in this new space, or an employer hiring the right candidate based on what their needs are?
So really the goal of the network is when you bring different people from different places, different sectors, different perspectives together, they sort of challenge each other's ideas and frankly could shine a light in one's blind spot to say, oh, I hadn't thought about that. When I talked with this person, or when they said, hey, you may be interested in this report, or what about this? That challenges us to think about things in a different way. So I think a part of the success, obviously we can do the bean counting and count the number of members, engagement, who shows up, and the things that we do. We'll host a symposia and how many people come to the workshops, that sort of thing. But also, I'd be interested in what other ideas take flight because they just had a conversation or they engaged with a network. What other research takes flight? What other curriculum is developed? What other idea or other, I'll say, unknown X is developed because this network was able to catalyze this convening around AI. So I think a large part for me of success, yes, we'll count the beans. Math people love counts of beans. But we'll also look at what new knowledge was generated as a result of engagements. What new curriculum was thought about as a result of, or what new connections were made as a result of. So we're hoping that this research coordination network will not only fuel new research in AI innovations because of the connections that it makes, also it'll fuel new innovations in how we teach from K to grade. And then also I think it will also help industry think about what does it mean for an AI job? And there are a lot of job requisitions that have AI in there, and there's expectations. But what does industry really want as far as competency? How can we train them before they step over that threshold of industry? What does that look like? So I think it will help industry better define expectations for what they want students or workers to either come in with or to have. And so I'm hoping that we'll have some sort of added value in those capacities. And I'm hoping I'll be surprised. Sometimes when you ignite a spark, different things take off in new ways. And just being open to that and open to big thinking. And also we'll be moving at an accelerated rate. And so, just keep us in your positive thoughts as we steward this, at Howard from a research practitioner perspective. But we will work at an accelerated rate. And I must say, we're very thankful from the support from the U.S. National Science Foundation for supporting this project to really serve as a backbone catalyst for jobs in AI. For the disclaimer, everything I say, I'm not speaking on behalf of any organization. All views are my own. We're really thankful to the NSF for working alongside with us to excel AI jobs for the nation.
So the Research Coordination Network is aiming to be a foundation for sustained national engagement. So for you, what does success look like 5 years after the initial phase of the Research Coordination Network's work is complete? How are these frameworks and the public-private partnerships you're developing going to guarantee that momentum and guidance is continuing long into the future?
So this is a 2-year project, maybe extended a year, but really to move at an accelerated rate. I'm ready to move. I want to move this and move it fast, right at the pace, if not maybe a little bit faster than the AI technology development, somewhat of an AI quantum leap per se. The reason why it's kind of like a short sprint, in 2 years, we may be talking about something else, right? In 3 years, I think in 5 years, maybe at that time, we will figure out quantum computing, which will then take research AI into a completely different ballgame, a new ballgame. So if we figure out quantum computing in 5 years, that's going to be, I'll just say, crazy big, for lack of a better phrase. And I'm hoping in a shorter time span that we can figure out this thing of data centers. So we have, when people build buildings, you can make them green buildings, I think is what they call them, so that they're environmental friendly and actually make a positive contribution to the environment. And so to fuel all this stuff, either if it's AI or quantum, we're going to need the power of the data centers. How do we do that in a way that's green? And I'm hoping we figure that out in a less than 5-year time period. Because like I said, I think quantum may push us in a different realm. We'll also have probably a different AI technology that we'll think about. Gen AI will be a thing of the way, way past. We'll move past voice AI agents into something else we haven't thought about. But for me, that unknown is where the fun is. Where will that unknown go? Where will that unknown be? And just being able to kind of play along in that space. But I would say by the end of 2 years that we have some, not agreed upon, right? Not a consensus, but at least some ideas to define what is this thing of an AI job, to define what knowledge, skills, and abilities are needed. And then also to define, well, how do we train people for those AI jobs, either those in the workplace or those entering? Because we're placing a lot of, I'll say, burden or work, for lack of a better word, on teachers in K-12, faculty in higher education and beyond, to really figure out, well, how do we teach with AI? As a mathematician, we in mathematics had to figure out, well, how do we teach with a technology called a graphing calculator? There are cat fights about it. Well, how do we teach? What do we not teach? What can we teach now? And how do we really make sure that we are enhancing both teaching and learning? Back in my day, we had those trig tables where we'd open up these big books so we could look up the sine of 5 and then we could write the number down. Well, we don't need trig tables anymore, log tables. We have a graphing calculator. So there's certain things that we don't do anymore because of that technology called the graphing calculator. Now that we have the technology called AI, what are we going to teach? What are we not going to teach? And how do we do it? And how do we do it in a way that prepares students for AI jobs? And then also, how do we upskill those in the workforce? So it's a really, I think, a fun, unknown problem. And the problem that we're identifying is evolving over time, and that's okay. But if we can at least get a better handle on this thing called an AI job, this thing called knowledge and skills and abilities needed for this AI job, and then how do we train, would be amazing.
Is there anything that we didn't get to touch on yet that you really want to share with our listeners, maybe can take away?
I'll say this, that I am a mathematician and I lead with curiosity. Well, AI wasn't in my dissertation, I won't say how many decades ago. I have a great deal of curiosity about how things work. Why do they work? Where do they work? How can we network things together? So that curiosity is what led me into AI, and it was led me into figuring out, learning, and forming AI policy, AI curricula, forming AI partnerships, that sort of thing. And so it really was leading with curiosity. I know there are some of us who have this great deal of apprehension around AI. I'm not going to say it's right or wrong, no judgment from me, but I would just encourage people to stay curious about what it is and how it is, and then also to delve onto the hood to see how does it really work. Because at the end of the day, my biased description, AI is applied math. You're using a tool, probabilistic, or you have functions or what have you, to actually try to make a prediction about something. Sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong, but maybe it can give us some insight, as in my home research, which is mathematical modeling. It can give us an insight as to what is, or help us make predictions, or help us do things. But it's not 100% right all the time. It's not 100% correct. So there has to be a human in the loop with an eye to interpret, to leverage, to oversee, to make sure it's stewarded properly. There are different places that we can all come into AI. We can just play around with it, or delve into the mathematics part of it, or creating chatbots, or just experimenting. So I would always just encourage people to experiment and play, understand privacy and security around when you do experiment and play, and also to have an open mind as we go forward. It won't take over our lives. I don't think the robots are coming, knock on wood, right? But how can we think about it as a fun tool to augment our everyday work, just like I use a phone, just like I use a computer. I guess the calculator now is in my phone, right? So just think about it and keep an open mind. And at the end of the day, leave with curiosity.
Thank you again, Dr. Washington, and thank you to our listeners. We hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll see you next time on the DOL Pod.